Socialist politicians in New York have pushed landlords to the breaking point, resulting in mounting debt, dilapidated properties, and no hope for the future. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I have an interesting article for you today, and it's coming out of New York City. Now, I've covered many of the topics out of New York because they're just outrageous, anti-landlord, pro-tenant protections in place that absolutely strip the property owners of all of their rights. And it's just crazy. And I just want people to know what's going on up there. It is, the very first place where this stuff is happening, and then it spreads throughout the rest of the country. So, this is very important. We don't want to see this kind of thing happening anywhere else. And it's unfortunate that the landlords up there are going through this mess. So the article I have actually is covering the story of one landlord. And hey, this guy, he worked his way up from nothing to build up into become a great property owner. But he's getting torn down by the local politicians who don't give a darn about all the struggles that he went through and think that he's just, the same as, these big, evil, bad guys. Okay, and it's just not the case. So yeah, this is exactly what I'm talking about all the time when I say, hey, the majority of landlords, we're doing the right thing. We're out here trying to make repairs to our properties, etc. But then you throw all these rules, all these regulations on top of us. You take away any incentive for us to make any improvements to our properties. You make it so we can't make a profit. And what do you think is going to happen? It's going to make everything worse, and it's going to be worse for the tenants. Okay, so yeah, it's an absolutely crazy situation, and I hate hearing about it, but I want to share this story just so everyone knows about it. Okay, and I find these articles all the time about these situations that these landlords are going through, and I feel like, man, it's just so important that we get these stories out there. Now, before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like and subscribe button. Maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. What do you think of these progressive, far left-leaning, socialist politicians who are passing rules and laws and regulations that basically are undercutting capitalism, that are putting landlords in the poorhouse and expecting us to basically become the social housing providers for their cities, okay? I think that it's ridiculous. I think that it's stupid. I think we should vote these people out of office, but we can't because the tenants outnumber the landlords. The tenants outnumber the property owners, and they're going to vote in their own best interest. So in places like New York, landlords are screwed over, okay? And it's going to take people with a lot of money who are able to withstand all of these rules and meet all the, compliance and all that. They are the only ones who are going to be able to operate and still make a profit. And that's awful, because I believe in real estate. I really do. I believe that real estate is a great way to build wealth. I did it, okay? I came from nothing. I didn't own any properties. I didn't get any inheritance. All I did was worked hard, saved a ton of money, working just a crap ton of overtime hours, right? And paid off all my debts, followed the Dave Ramsey plan, and then I started buying properties and renting them out. And over time, I was able to build up to the point where I'm at right now, where I'm comfortable. I'm a comfortable small landlord. I'm not super rich by any means, okay? But I'm doing okay. And unfortunately, all of these laws and rules and regulations, they are making it so that people, they can't do what I did. They can't start from nothing and then buy a property and rent it out and then, be able to, build their retirement or build income or a business out of it. And that's awful. Okay. You don't have to have any kind of special skills to be a landlord. You don't have to have any sort of special education, and it's much more accessible than a lot of other businesses are. So that's why I promote it so much. But seeing all this stuff where we're portrayed negatively and we're forced to face all these ridiculous socialist policies, that just pisses me off. But anyway, before I go too much into my rant, let's get into this article. Now, it's coming from tabletmag.com, and it says, the DSA comes for Immigrant Landlords of Color. And by the DSA, they mean the Democratic Socialists of America. And I believe that the famous politician who's a member is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's up in the U.S. House of Representatives. And, you know, she's the spitting image of what these socialists look like. Okay, but anyway, let's get into this article and see what it says. It was a week to Christmas, but Lincoln Echols wasn't feeling the Yuletide spirit. The boiler in the 14-unit building he owns in Brooklyn's Crown Heights neighborhood had gone belly up a few months before, and supply chain issues were making it impossible to find a good replacement. It was getting cold in New York, so Echols bought each of his tenants a space heater before shelling out a small fortune on heat pumps. A green solution he said he liked in part because it was good for the environment. The investment meant he was now nearly $300,000 in debt. And New York, he said, was doing everything it could to drive him out of business. So yeah, this guy, he owns a 14-unit apartment building, and hey, the boiler went out. These old buildings, they got boilers in them, okay? So yeah, a lot of the newer buildings, they don't do the boiler thing anymore. They actually have furnaces, etc. But this guy, he had a boiler, so he ended up buying heat pumps for all the units in the place just so that his tenants could have heat. A very, very large investment, $300,000 according to him. And, you know, obviously, he's in debt now. But because of these New York laws, guess what? He probably won't be able to easily recover that amount of money. But let's keep going. The politicians don't care, he told me, speaking from the icy whitewashed boiler room where he'd spent hours a day these last few months. They say, well, you're a bad businessman. None of them operate property. If they did, and they were honest, they would talk about things differently. When we think of New York landlords, we think of the Trumps, the Kushners, the Helmsleys, big names and big egos whose bad behavior provides as much fodder to the front pages of tabloids as it does to the business pages. But in a city that has long taken pride in being home to diverse enclaves of newcomers from all over, your landlord these days may be someone like Echols, who moved to Brooklyn from Jamaica as an infant and whose family owes its break to his Uncle Walter, who climbed his way up from fruit picker to owner of more than 100 multi-unit properties. Tweak a few dates and a few factoids, and the story of the Echols family could easily be that of many American Jewish families who arrived here fleeing poverty and adversity and worked their way into the American dream, one small piece of property at a time. Except now, that dream is no longer available to a new generation of immigrants or first-generation Americans. And ironically, it is the progressive politicians most vocal about equity who are the bitterest foes of folks like Echols. That's right. Okay, these progressive politicians, they believe that landlords are just bad, that we're evil. Okay, and the story of Echols and his family, that is a very similar story to me, okay? One property at a time, just slowly accumulating more and more, okay? I started off, my very first property was in Phoenix, Arizona, and I bought that property by just, like I said, saving all of the money I could for as long as possible, living way below my means, and I bought that property in Phoenix, and then I, bought a second property doing the same thing. Then I moved to Omaha and I bought another one and another one and another one. And you see where this story is going, right? It basically, by learning how the real estate investment business worked and by working my butt off, I was able to build up these properties and end up where I am today. And that's all, it's not as complicated as people think. And a lot of people who are immigrants, a lot of people who are, they started off low income, they were able to do it. But now, because of these socialists, right, who run New York, now that dream is darn near impossible. But, I'm going to skip over a little bit of the article because, it's a human interest story and it's really interesting, but I like getting into the details, okay? And he goes into detail exactly why, what these policies do to him, right? And specifically rent control, okay? Rent control is the policy that's screwing him over probably the most up in New York. So it says here, These policies, Echols said, leave him between a rock and a hard place. If he renovates his units, he stands to lose a fortune on each one, an investment the new laws aren't allowing him to recover. If he doesn't, the new tenant is likely to complain to the Department of Housing Preservation and Development, the dreaded HPD, which means inspections, lawsuits, and a fortune in violations. So we keep some units empty. I need about $1,000 just to cover basic costs like water, he said. I have 3 where the rent is under that. Unless they change the law, they're not rentable. Under New York's new rules, regardless of how much money Echols spends to get an apartment ready for tenants, he can't add more than $89.29 to the monthly rent. The lowball estimate on renovating one of my 2 bedrooms, he said, was $88,000. And to that, a surging increase in tax assessments, and you can see why, even before COVID, things were looking grim for Echols. So, yeah. Pay attention to those numbers, okay? He can raise rent $89.29 a month, right? $90 a month, essentially, right? And you multiply that by 10 months is $900 times 12 months. You add another 180, so $1,080 per year. However, it's going to cost him $88,000 to renovate the unit. So there's no profit in renovating this unit. It would take him darn near forever to recuperate the money that he spends on renovating that unit. So what I'm saying is, he just laid out exactly why these rent control policies lead to buildings becoming dilapidated. Or he said he's just leaving these units empty because he can't make any money. The expenses, he said right there, it costs $1,000 to cover the basic expenses for the unit, and he can't even charge that much in rent. So he's paying some of the basic expenses out of his own pocket just so a tenant can live there and get cheap rent, or he can leave the place empty. So he decided to leave the place empty. So what rent control does is it ends up with less affordable rental units available for rent, dilapidated units, and he's explaining this. This is a small landlord who is explaining this in this article, and this is the stuff I've been talking about for years. And these socialists, they can't figure it out. They have no brains. They don't understand business. They never will, because they think business is evil. Well, we need to get these politicians out of office, okay? And that's the truth. We don't need people who don't understand how business works, trying to tell businesses how they can operate. And, I absolutely hate reading a story like this and hearing about this guy going through so much trouble. But here's my suggestion, and I'll say this suggestion over and over and over again. If you're a landlord in one of these places, right, I would sell to somebody else who wants to deal with it. Sell to the big guys, and take that money, 1031 exchange it into property out in the Midwest or the South or somewhere where they're much more landlord friendly. And that way, that you don't have to deal with all these ridiculous rent control policies. You don't have to deal with all the changing rules every year. You never know how much rent you can make or not, and it just isn't worth it.